So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's Lovely People webinar. We were originally going to have Jackie Ford with us this evening, but unfortunately she had a bit of a family crisis and had to bail on us. And so the lovely Liz Scott very kindly agreed to step in because it's actually Mental Health Awareness Day today. All World Mental Health Awareness Day today, and we thought, as Liz is doing so much work in that field at the moment, it would be a great opportunity to have a chat with her tonight, to share what she's up to. And I know that you've got an event coming up very soon, which I do believe that you're going to be live streaming that event. So even if people are listening to this and it's too far physically to get to, they could come to that event, and I know we're all going, so it's going to be a great event, I think. So for those of you that don't really know who you are, Liz, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you? And
yeah, absolutely. So I'm Liz Scott, and I'm a wellbeing coach. I do a lot of work in education, do a lot of work with school leaders actually and teachers, and have been very inspired by all the sort of statistics I've seen recently around mental illness and young people and self-harming and depression and anxiety. I just see that I'm very drawn to supporting our young people. And it's kind of strange in a way because I don't have children myself, but I really see that there is something that I can support young people, but also those that support young people with. And I know we're going to talk about that. And I work with my husband, Stu, and Stu Newbury. He used to be a police officer. I used to be a BBC reporter. And we both ended up in the end coaching, and we've been coaching for 12 years. But for about the past 5 years, we came across something called the Inside Out Understanding, which is the area which we see can be so beneficial around mental health and mental well-being. So that's the real history of me in a nutshell.
Okay, that sounds absolutely amazing. So I know that, like you said, helping young people is something that is very, very dear to your heart. So this event that you've got coming up, do you want to tell us a little bit about that and what people, if they came to that event, what they might hear? A little sample of what might be going on there, some little clues.
Yeah, of course. So we've got a variety of speakers. These are international speakers. We've got, for example, the Commonwealth Youth Work Ambassador, Robin Lockhart. He's going to come and talk about gangs and youth violence. We've got Jamie Smart, who's a Sunday Times best-selling author and trainer and facilitator, and he's going to come and talk about his vision for sharing this message across the world, and what ideas he's got there. We've got a psychiatrist, we've got a professional sportsman, a rugby player, we've got a former deputy head teacher. We've basically got a variety of different people. But what's really interesting, I think, about the message that everybody is sharing is that we're all looking at something very simple. We're looking at this idea that no one is broken. And we're looking at the idea that resilience is part of the system. That's like, in essence, who we truly are. And so what we're going to be doing, all of us, Stuart and myself as speakers as well, we'll be sharing, looking at the area of work that we're working in, whether it be gangs in London, or with leaders in schools, or as a psychiatrist, or as a sportsman, or working in prisons like Jackie Moses, she works in prisons. We're all going to be giving we're all going to be pointing in the same direction, showing how our work is making an impact, but that we're working with this in very, very different fields. And ultimately, what we're saying is that there's a really simple misunderstanding about how the mind works. And it's so simple that, and so obvious that when we tell people, they go, oh yeah, of course, I should I should be aware of this. But when we don't listen into what I call is our natural mental health balancing system, then we can just go awry. We can get caught up in stories and stress and anxiety. So in essence, what we're saying to people is that you're not broken because you've actually got this inbuilt system that looks after you, your mental health. But what we've done as a society is we've kind of overlooked it, we've ignored it, we've got very distracted with other things. And when you actually get back in touch with it and you allow it to guide you, then what we find is that we just seem to live life with more ease. So in essence, the conference is sharing that message, but really putting the focus on young people and those that work with young people, because we just see that it's a piece that's missing in our culture that we could make and we think makes the biggest difference. So that's the conference. It's happening on the 22nd and 23rd of November. And geographically, for those people that don't know, but Stu and I and the conference is going to be in South Devon, and Debra and her team are in North Devon, and between us we are really collaborating, Debra, on shining a light on mental health within Devon. That's our vision. And this conference I see is, as your conference was in September, it's saying the same message around mental health. And as I see it, and I don't know about you, but it feels to me like the momentum is growing and people are beginning to really see something very healthy for themselves.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I can feel a real energy growing around it, and like you say, it's brilliant the collaboration that's beginning to come out of this, because like you say, we're in North Devon and we kind of set ourselves that target to make North Devon the most mentally healthy place to live and work. And I know when we said that, you were like, oh yeah, we want them. So we said, okay, we'll just say Devon, you can do the South, we'll do the North, and help each other collaborate and kind of then the kind of the way that just spirals out, why not the world? It's an amazing message that we're sharing, and such a simple one. I mean, we were really lucky enough today to go into a school and speak to some children today, and you can just see, even with the short amount of time that we spent there, the kind of already they were sort of curious about what it was we were sharing. They're kind of like, really, and they were sort of, but what about when this happens, but what about when that happens? So yeah, we had some absolutely amazing interactions and amazing questions. So can you share with us a little bit, in case there's anyone on here or anyone who watches the replay or anything, it sounds a little bit like we're kind of skirting around what this simple thing is and we're not actually sharing it. So do you want to share a little bit of what the actual, the essence of what it is that we're talking about here?
Yes. Well, as I see it, we're very tuned in. I'm going to get to what you're asking, so I might just go around the houses, just a word of warning. All right. So look, here we are in the UK, and we're moving into autumn. The leaves are turning, the leaves are falling off the tree. We see all around us nature just doing its thing. It's a transition. The swallows, they've flown back to Africa, South Africa. I see the squirrels are busy like eating hazelnuts and collecting chestnuts, and there's just something very natural about the rhythm, isn't there? The natural cycle and rhythm of what we see all around us. And I guess what I see that the animals tuned into and nature is tuned into is this real deeper intelligence. It's the kind of, it's like the core of who we are, a deeper intelligence that is something that we all have access to, or we all are made of. It's like, what separates the swallows from nature? Well, they are nature. It's like that deeper intelligence is them, as it is us. And what seems to have happened is that we've kind of lost sight of it, because I think what's happened is we've become really, really busy in our heads. So a really simple example is that we all know that physiologically we have a system in place that looks after us, that heals us, that if we cut ourselves, like last year I tripped over and I really cut my knee badly, and it was really sore and I was limping on it, and what I did though is I put on some dressing, and I made sure that was kept clean, and I kept changing it, and and that was it, because I knew that the cut would take care of itself. It's like the healing process would kick in, and already had kicked in as soon as I had tripped over. Now that we know that happens, we trust that implicitly, that is the case with our bodies. But it's the same with our mental health as well. There's a natural deeper intelligence. It's a natural mental health correcting system, balancing system that nudges us and wants us to stay healthy. And we kind of know it. So let me give you an example. I was speaking to a head teacher, and she today this was, and she was explaining about all the things that she's got busy going on in her world, in her life. And she told me this example of something else that somebody had asked her to do next week, and she knew that she couldn't do it. She just knew, like she had no capacity to take on this extra piece of work, just no capacity. And we just paused on it, because she was getting quite upset, thinking about, what am I going to do? If I say yes to this, it means I'll say no to my children. It means I'm going to be late home at night. Now, the bit that she'd missed is that she knew it wasn't healthy for her mentally to take on this piece of work. Like, her mental health system had given her the right information. She knew it. But then what had happened, and this is what happens quite naturally, or not naturally, but we often do this, is we try and override it. We get busy in our thinking. We go into, but what will people think? And maybe I should. And if I don't do it, someone else will have to do it. And isn't this what I'm paid for? And but what about my children? And maybe I'm a bad mother. And so it moved from a question of, someone said, would you do this next week? And she knew the answer was no. For her to stay mentally healthy, the answer was no. And then she had this flare up inside her of all this mental turmoil. She called it like a washing machine in her head, that kind of went off as she started to think, what would she say? Now, the bit that she'd really missed or overlooked wasn't whether she said yes or no. And I have no idea what is the right thing for her to do. I mean, she will have to make a choice on that. I get that. But her mental health system had given her a very clear signal, like what it needed. And it didn't need any more. It didn't need any more stuff to think about, quite frankly. And it had kind of given her that information. Now, how I'm going to be working with her, and how I work with all the people that I work with, is it's like I'm helping them start to get back in touch with this incredible system that we've got that does nudge us and guide us, but that we override day to day. And then we can get really caught up in our heads, worrying with anxiety and revving up our thinking. And yet, when we pay attention to it, when we listen to it, when we understand what it is we're listening to, we start to trust it. And we start to realize that it's giving us really good information to look after us. And so, in essence, when we talk about the inside out understanding, I mean, ultimately what we're pointing to, or what I'm pointing to, is this deeper intelligence behind life. For me, it's a spiritual intelligence. It's the core of who I truly am. And when I tune into that, it just feels that life is more easeful to navigate, regardless of what comes up along my path. And when I don't tune into it, or when I override it, because it's always there, then that's often when I get a bit stuck. I get mentally exhausted. I get snappy. I get tired. All of those things. So the way that I'm seeing it at the moment, Deborah, is that we call it the inside out understanding. And when it comes to mental health, I just see it as this deeper intelligence that we are part of, that is communicating with us all the time, because it is us. And then we get lost in our thoughts and our thinking. And it's when we get lost and distracted, that's when we feel the real mental distress and emotional distress. So that's kind of, I don't know what you make of that, and maybe how you see it would be good too.
Yeah. I think it's always good to hear this, I think, in different ways, because people think, we're all saying the same thing, but we've all heard our things, and certain things have been particularly useful to us, haven't they? So we kind of relay what's been useful to us. And I think one of the things that I see is we're pointing to something that's so abstract, and we can only kind of say it's kind of like this, it's sort of this, it's almost this, but there aren't actual words in our language, I don't think, that fully describe what it is. And the more I see, the more people that I work with, and I'm sure the same for you, the things that people come back with when they see the answers, like the head teacher that you were talking about, it can be very, very tempting when somebody comes to you with a problem like that. You're kind of sitting there and somebody tells you what's going on for them, and it can be really, really easy to fall into the idea that you're there to solve their problem, and you're there to kind of say, oh well, don't take on that work, or do this, or do it. And what I see more and more is that what we're pointing to is something that everybody already has within them, and it's not our job to sort out other people's problems. But if we point them back to this system that you were talking about, to this innate intelligence that they have within them, they do know what to do. And it never ceases to amaze me what people come up with. They kind of come with these problems that look insurmountable sometimes, and given the space and pointing somebody in the right direction, they then start to tell you how they're going to solve their problems and how they're going to sort it out. And sometimes it might be something that had occurred to you, but very often it can be things, I know I've sat there and thought, oh, well, I wouldn't do that. Yeah. But it just, we all have our own intelligence. And when we follow that, great things occur. And I think it's amazing to be working with young people. So have you got some examples you can share with us about, when you've been working with young people, some of the things that have happened or anything?
Yeah. Yes, I definitely have. So the before I came across the inside out, and I'm going to tell you two stories. One is before I came across the inside out understanding. I was a coach, and I worked with some year 6 children who wanted to learn how to be coaches, and they were going to coach year 3 children, right? So it was a local primary school. So I thought, great, I'd love to do this. I do a lot of work with leaders, but not a lot of work with children. So this is what I did. Now, in those days, I was a coach that had learned a lot of techniques and tools and strategies. And I had a bit of an idea of what coaching was about. Coaching to me was where you would sit down with somebody else and have a conversation. They'd tell you their problem, and then you would help them resolve their problem by pointing them back. They would come up with the answers, but it was like, that's how you did coaching. There was a way you did coaching. And so I worked with a teaching assistant who was an amazing woman, and we we created this very safe space for our year sixes and the year threes, where we basically said we gave the year sixes a bit of training about listening and all that kind of stuff. But we basically said, look, we're going to team you up with some year three children. So this is like eight-year-olds, and the year sixes were probably about 10 or 11. And just kind of, we're not going to tell you why these year threes have been chosen. I mean, mainly it was because they just were, finding learning a bit hard, or they're a bit distracted, or they're a bit shy, or a bit noisy. Sort of that was kind of why they've been chosen. But we said to the year six children, just do what you think's right. And I remember for about 2 or 3 weeks watching the year sixes and the year threes get together, and I would be getting very anxious and annoyed and frustrated, because what they weren't doing, which is what I thought they should be doing, is sitting down, having quiet conversations with each other and working out problems. And what the year sixes were doing is that they were basically taking the youngsters out to play. Like they'd take them out to play, or they'd play hangman, or they'd do a game in the class, or they'd take them to the library. And I'd be thinking, well, that's not coaching. Like, that's not right. And I remember the head teacher, who actually lives in our village, she stopped one day and just said, oh, how's the coaching going at the school? And I said, well, to be honest, I said, it's going well, but it's not really coaching. I felt a bit like, that's not really coaching. They're not doing it right. And she said to me, look, just look at the older children. Just look at the older children. She said, and just see what you see. She's quite a wise lady, this head teacher. So when I went back and the next time, rather than looking at it through the lens of they're not doing this right, I just looked to see what was actually happening. And what I saw blew me away, because the older children, they were working in such an intuitive way with the youngsters. So I'll give you 2 examples. So there was one example where one of the year 3 girls came in. Let's call her Josie. So Josie came in, and she was in tears because she was so scared of coming in. She was like as quiet as a mouse. She was terrified of seeing these older children, but there was something that she knew that it would be a good idea to do. And so I remember watching her, and she came in and she was red-eyed, and she'd obviously been crying, and she sat there, and we teamed her up with a girl called Imogen, who was 10, 11-year-old. And Imogen took her out onto the playground and got a netball and started throwing a netball to her. And I was just watching. And what Imogen was doing is she got Josie, all she did is she said, I'm going to throw you the ball, and I want you to say your name when you catch the ball. So she threw the ball. They were very close to each other like this. So they could always pass the ball. And Josie would go, Josie, like this, in this tiny little voice. And then Imogen took a step back and she did the same thing again. And then she got it so that they were across the width of the playground, and they had to sort of bounce the ball in between them. And now Imogen was starting to ask Josie some questions, and Josie, when she caught the ball, would answer the questions. So I saw that this youngster, who was as quiet as a mouse and petrified, suddenly just finding like she was finding her confidence. It was extraordinary. And after the session, Josie went back to her class, and I just said to Imogen, what were you doing there then? And Imogen said, oh, I was helping Josie find her voice. And we hadn't told Imogen that Josie was shy or scared, but she just intuitively knew. And not only that, we were talking about deeper intelligence. She kind of just got back in touch with her deeper intelligence to kind of intuitively know the best way to connect with Josie. And I was blown away, absolutely blown away. And then there was this other young lad, and I remember he took this youngster to the library, and I said, can I sit in and just sort of see what you do? And he didn't know about this youngster, but this youngster was finding it really hard to make friends. And so he went to the library and he started building a Lego house with this youngster. And they built this Lego house, and then they got these little Lego figures out, and they started having a conversation in the house with these Lego figures. And then he, this year, sixth lad, he went and he got a book, and he said, look, I'm just going to read you a little story now. And he got I think it was a Brer Rabbit book, and he read him a story, and then it was the end of the session. So I did the same thing with this lad. I said, so what were you doing there then? What was it that you, what was it that you were doing? And he said, well, I think that this young lad, he finds it really hard to make friends. We hadn't told him that. He said, so what I thought I'd do is I thought if we built a house and then we had pretend conversations, he'd start to know what kinds of conversations to have so that he might be able to make friends. And he said, and then what I did is I'd read this book about friendships in the week. It was like a picture book. And he said, I just thought I'd read that to him. And I was blown away again. It's like, talk about the intuition, the empathy, the compassion, just that groundedness that these youngsters were just, we didn't teach them that. We didn't teach them compassion or empathy or listening or trying to work out what was wrong. Not that anything was wrong with these kids, but we didn't teach them that. It's like, left to their own natural devices, what I saw emerging was this extraordinary wisdom. So that's just an example. That was before I knew the principles. But I look back now and I think, oh, that's what was going on. And more recently, I went into a school, and this was in preparation for this conference. And hopefully these youngsters are going to be at the conference too. They're going to be sharing. But it was a group of year 9 and 11 students. So that's right, isn't it? 9. It's year 10. No, year 10 and 12 students. So it was like sixth form students and, as in old money, year 4, 40 students. And we were talking about, the work that we're talking about. We were talking about their inner intelligence, their place of calm, of who they truly are without all their rubbishy stories that they believe. And we just did this very simple exercise. It was almost like a visualization, just to sort of settle them down. And I saw one of these young lads, and he was kind of on the outside of the group, and he was really quiet. This was the second session, so he came in. It's on the second session. He was really quiet, and I thought, crikey, he's come back. That's really good, because it was a voluntary group. And we did this visualization, and I suddenly saw, you know what it is when you just see something in someone? I thought, oh, he's really landed, he's touched base back right inside that place of resilience and wisdom. He's right there. I need to go and let him know he's there. So I went to him, and we use the metaphor of the diamond, and we say, look, that's your diamond. And I just said to him, let's call him John. I said, John, how are you feeling at the moment? And he said, I feel Zen-like. I said, oh, that's awesome. I said, you know that feeling that you've got right at the minute? I said, that's who you truly are. And he looked at me, and it was just like we really just connected soul to soul. And he just it was like, oh yeah, it's like he really saw and experienced that for himself. And later on, as we were sharing in the session, he began to open up more, and he began to share how he was getting into stories about not fitting in, and how he was all these ridiculous lengths that he was going as a young lad, trying to fit in, getting his hair coloured and wearing the right clothes, and all this effort, because he thought that if he did all of that, he would then feel himself. But actually what he began to see is that was who he was. And then he got lost in his stories. But when youngsters see who they truly are, when they get back, like when we do as well, when we get back in touch with that real rock solid groundedness, like that's who we are, then you can't ever take that away from someone. They know it. And they start to know which bit to trust, like that. We're talking about that deeper intelligence, that navigation system. They start to see that that's the bit to trust. And then they start to distrust, or this is how I see it for me, when I get revved up and agitated, well, my feelings let me know that I'm in that space, that headspace. And I know to distrust that, even though it looks really real. So that's the kind of way we've been working with young people. And I've seen another lady who's also working with young people called Vicky Otter. Seen her at work, and she's been working with year 3s and 4s, well, across the range really, in primary schools. And some of the wisdom and the extraordinary clarity that some of these young people have it just blows me away. It absolutely blows me away. Now, I'm really aware that these young people are in a system of education that really doesn't nurture that. It doesn't see that itself, because the teachers are swimming in their whirring washing machine of thinking. So they've kind of lost touch with that natural wisdom that we're pointing people back to. So I really see that if we can support our young people, and if we can support, in my world, because I work in schools, teachers and leaders to see this as well, I just think it's going to make a huge difference. So that's just a couple of examples of how we've been working.
It was lovely. That was just beautiful to hear. It is amazing how quickly, when you point somebody back, if they see something, how quickly they connect with that and go there. They're just like, oh yeah, and they're off and running in that direction.
It's so true, because Debra, I think, and I'm guilty of this too, because when I did all my other coaching and stuff, I was looking in the wrong direction. So I was looking to fix the story I had about me. I was looking to make Liz a better person, like make Liz more efficient, have a purpose, be more spiritual, be more peaceful. It's like I was on a mission to fix Liz. Well, that Liz doesn't exist. What we're pointing to is the bit of us that is at the core of who we are, that ever-present awareness. That's the bit we're pointing to. And when we start to really attune and align ourselves with that, then we look with just real compassion on the stories that we tell ourselves, on the ways that we beat ourselves up, and we just seem to, well, for me, I just seem to make, I say, better choices. It just makes no sense to get so wound up in my head anymore. And I still do, because I'm human, but ultimately I know that that's not who I am. So for me, this is just such an important message for me to have learned and to see, and I'm so grateful that I can see that for myself, and it just makes sense for me as much as possible to share with other people. That's where I am at the moment.
Yeah, I love the idea of sharing with the teachers and the students, because when we went into the school today, we have to have teachers in the room when we're talking and sharing. And one of the questions that we ask is, we talk a lot about feelings, and then we ask, where do they think these feelings come from? And we make it a multiple choice. So we give them 3 cards. We get 3 children to come and stand, each holding a card, and then they have to go to where they think the answer is. And so the multiple choices, the first one is from our thinking, our feelings come from what we're thinking when we feel them, and then we have our feelings come from outside of us, our parents sending us to school, or the teachers, or the bus, or somebody, a friend at school or something, or a mixture of these things. And we've been into the school now, I think that was our 4th time today, something like that. And we're working at the moment, the school, we're working with a different group each time we go in. We're negotiating more things to do, but that's how it's happening at the moment. And each time we ask that question, we have the majority of people, we have 50 children at a time, and I think we probably have 45 of them go straight to a mixture of both, that they think that their feelings come from both what they are feeling when they're, what they're thinking when they're feeling them, and a multitude of, all sorts of other places, the weather, the teachers, their friends, their parents, all this. And today when we were there, there was one of the teachers was a really nice teacher, and the kids were kind of all milling around and deciding where they were going to go. And so he kind of walked over, and Julie, who was actually with me, she just said to him, so, where would you go and stand then? So he went, well, it's obvious, isn't it? He said, I would go there, where everyone was going to this, and everybody, they were all going to this mixture. He said, well, it's there. He said, it's obvious, isn't it? Our feelings come from a mixture of places. And I just said, that's the misunderstanding. That's what it looks like. I said, yes, that's what my experience feels like. I said, but that's what we're here pointing out, that actually that isn't what is going on. That's the trick that your mind plays on you, that your feelings, they only ever come from one place. And he was blown away, this teacher. He was like, really? Wow. And then he was actually talking to the kids, because afterwards when we were talking about what the right answer was, and we had one child go and stand by the right answer, and it was the best friend of the boy that was actually holding up the right answer, so he'd gone to stand next to his friend, so he doesn't leave him on his own, so and he was the only one stood next to him, and so we were kind of saying, yeah, you're the one holding the right answer, sort of thing. And then the teacher was saying, hey, I'd completely got that wrong too. He said, I didn't see that. So then we were kind of inviting them to ask questions and to see places in their life where this was possible, and just basically to get curious about. I said, don't take my word for it, don't listen to me and Julie, go out into the world and we've said this, see for yourself what you sort of see. But it was really great the way that the teacher then got really curious with us, because we've been really lucky to get into this school, and we would love to work with the teachers too. So having this kind of conversation, and he was like, wow, and we were sort of saying, if the teachers can be pointing the children in the right, because they'd asked us to give the children something that they could use if they got upset or anything, and we were kind of it's not really. But when we had this conversation, I sort of said, the one thing that you could do, if you get into trouble, if you're struggling, or if you see one of your friends struggling or something, you could just ask them the question, where do they think their feelings are coming from? Where do they think this feeling of anxiety or struggle is coming from? I said, because as soon as we kind of begin to look in the right direction, magic happens. We open ourselves up to this power that's running through us. So it was really good to see the teacher.
How old were the children?
They were 14, I think.
Oh wow, brilliant.
So they were asking some great questions. But it's not ideal at the moment, because we are, as I said, there's 50 of them in the room, but they were all really, really engaged, actually, considering there was such a big group and everything. Each time they've been, and I just said, get curious and ask your teacher to find out more about this. So but it is amazing how they really want to be pointed back. There's they can really hear you when you start to talk about that they feel okay for 1 minute, and then they get a text message, or they don't get a text message that they thought they should get from a friend or their friend, or whatever. They're really they really want to hear something and help themselves. So it's really been a delight and a pleasure going in and working.
That sounds awesome what you're doing in it. And you see, the other thing which I think is so I say magical, but it's so different from what I thought, is I used to get really busy trying to make myself calmer and happier and all these other things that we all think we ought to be doing. And actually when the children, like with the examples that you're giving, when they start to see that there is a deeper intelligence, that there is I call it like the natural balancing system that we've got inside us. When they start to see that, then that starts to do a lot of the clearing for them. There isn't any mental effort needed, which is why often you'll find with young people. So, for example, I remember I was coaching, I guess she was 17, and she was just a daughter of a friend in the village. And she'd got herself, this 17-year-old, she got herself in a real lather. She had locked herself in a cupboard. She had a cleaning job after school, and she got such a lather one evening. She locked herself in a cupboard and texted her mum and said, please come and rescue me. And her mum came, and it was after that her mum said, oh, could you just have a chat with her? So I did. Now, the traditional way of looking at something like that is that we would go in and try and work out why she'd locked herself in the cupboard and try and dampen down those feelings of anxiety so she wouldn't have to do that, and maybe try and work out what was the trigger. And there's a lot of effort that goes into trying to unravel what seems like a really tangled ball of wool of story and emotions. But all I did is I pointed her back to, I call it, another word I use is her resilience. And I just said to her, I said, look, there's two things you've got to know, is that when you were in that thought storm, it was frightening. Like, there's no doubt when I get in my thought storms, they're really scary, really scary. And I said, do you know what you did? Is you went and kept yourself safe. Like, you listened to something inside you that kept yourself safe, and that involved you locking yourself in the cupboard. All right. And then I said, the other thing you need to know is that little voice, that resilience in you. There was one person that you knew that you could take you out of that situation. It was your mum. And that was who you texted. And she came and got you. It's like, so rather than looking at what is perceived to be a lack of resilience, that she'd got herself into that position, all we did is we shone a light on what was already coming through the system, even though she got really caught up in a thought storm, a distressing thought storm for her. Now, I saw that youngster 3 times, and I don't even know what we talked about. It doesn't really matter what we talked about, but I know what I was pointing her back to. And over time, she would say things like, she told me this story once where she fell out with her dad. Her dad was nagging her to do some homework, and she basically told him to F off and went off on the bus to see her friends. Like, and we can all relate to that, can't we? And anyway, so she's on this bus, chuntering along in her head, like, thinking about her dad. And then 2 stops into the journey, it's like she just got, I've got to go back home. She just got it. So she got off the bus and caught the next back home. Couldn't bring herself to speak to her dad, so stormed upstairs, slammed the door, and didn't speak to him for however many days. Now, she brought that to me as a like, oh my God, I'm still kind of getting caught up in all this stuff, and this is what happened. But we just unpicked it. She'd caught a bus. She'd listened to the voice which said, that's not the right decision. She'd come back. She'd realised that she wasn't in a place to have a calm conversation with her dad, so she took herself away from that situation so she didn't have to communicate with him. She was doing the best she could in that circumstance. And then things started to pop up in our conversations. Like, she'd tell us that she said, and we hadn't even talked about this, she said, you know what I've realised, she said, is that when I feel really, like, when I get a bit up in my head at school and I text my friends and I say, oh, I'm feeling really upset with Joe, let's say. I'm feeling upset with Joe. She said, what I've noticed is that all my friends text me back and go, oh, are you okay, babes? And oh, we'll talk at break. And oh, I know she's a right pain. And she was like that with me too. And so this girl, as she was telling me the story, she said, I've realized that, like, what happens is it gets to break time and I'm actually over it. And all these friends want to talk about, like, how I'd fallen out with Joe. And it's like, oh no, I'm fine with Joe now. It's like, it was just back then. And so she said, I really get that it's not actually helpful when I'm in that place to text my friends, because they're kind of having me stay stuck there rather than helping me out. Now, I didn't tell her that. She just naturally saw it because she was listening in the right direction. And she started to realize that with her exams, that she was getting really up in her head and anxious about her exams, and talking with her friends about her anxiety about her exams wasn't helpful. Now, nobody had told her that, but she began to realize that wasn't helpful, so she didn't do it. Now, I spoke to her mum like about a year after this, because what often happens when you work in this way is people go away, and because they're just back in touch with their own natural intelligence, they don't really put it down to anything that's gone on with you and them, because it's like, well, no, it's kind of like obvious now because I'm back in touch with it. And I said to her mum, I said, how's she getting on? And she said, well, it's amazing. You know, she did all her exams, and that in itself was really amazing, because we thought that she was, like, for some of them that she'd get too panicky, she wouldn't actually take them. She actually did really well in her exams, which was a bonus. I mean, you know, which is fabulous. But she's actually gone to university, and not only that, she's going to share a student house with people she doesn't know. She never would have done that before. Now, for me, that's just somebody. It's a young person just back in touch with their mental health. It's really not rocket science when they're back in touch with it. It's the most natural thing in the world. So for me, pointing back with young people and adults too, but with young people particularly, when you're back in touch with it, it's just common sense. It's not a big deal. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense, Deborah? I feel like I've just talked for a very long time.
That's what this is about. A conversation. It's really lovely. I think it's great to kind of hear people's stories and what's happened. And we are very much pointing back to common sense. But it's amazing how easily we can lose touch with our own common sense, isn't it? And like you said when you were talking about the way that the girl texts her friends and things like that, I think one of the reasons why I would like to work with the teachers because if everybody's kind of if everybody's pointing to this same thing and kind of saying, hey, I know you've fallen out with Joe earlier, but we don't need to talk about it now, do we? Rather than kind of, you know, waiting to break to go and have this conversation. I think if we all see, yeah, do you know what? It is common sense actually if we've moved past it, we've moved past it. There's nothing to sort out. There's nothing to do. I think that's beautiful. Shall we open it up and see if anyone would like to comment or ask a question or, you know, join in or anything? Has anyone got anything they would like to share themselves, or anyone like to say anything? You can either put your hand up, you can unmute yourself, or not. I think we're doing quite well there anyway. Hiya, Terry.
I just wanted to say how much I'm appreciating this conversation. I got off the camera for a second because I had to eat my lunch, but it's just beautiful to hear your stories about how kids are so gracefully and naturally understanding and seeing how this works. It's almost like in some ways it feels like, you know, they have so much to teach us, right? As adults, because it just kind of switches so quickly anyway, so really don't have a question other than just saying how impactful this is, this conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Maybe a question will come up as we go along.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. And I love what you're saying there, because there's less stories to machete through with young people. That seems to be what I'm experiencing. And I don't do a lot of work with young people, in all fairness. But that seems to, it's like they're more in tune with it. So,
I think too, your comment around the teacher part of this, the connecting with teachers around this and helping them to see differently could be and is an amazing place to share this understanding.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
And naturally coming through them.
My
everyone
dream,
around them.
My dream is that, a bit like Debra was saying, that teachers, and it just becomes it becomes just an ordinary language of a school community. It's like it really isn't that special. I mean, it's beautiful, and that's what life is supposed to be, is beautiful. But actually it's not, it's just very natural. It's really natural. And that's what I love about it. And I just find that with the schools that we're working in, every teacher, right, no teacher I've ever come across, every teacher has got the well-being of children at the heart of what they're doing, like without exception. That's absolutely at the core of what they're about. But they're living it through a misunderstanding, because they're caught up in their anxieties and worries of data, of exams, of grades, of outcomes, of being inspected, of doing the marking, of being good enough. So they're actually caught up in their whir of fear. And actually, so part of what our work is to have them touch base with that resilience, that core of who they truly are. So then hopefully what we would see in a school community is that becomes a very natural way of communication and just connecting. It's very human, really. It really isn't rocket science. Like, when we are having human to human, soul to soul connected contact, it just feels nourishing and healthy. That's because it is nourishing and healthy. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I could really feel that with, and the teachers that we've spoken to, sometimes it's interesting to go into the schools and see how much they're kind of barking away at these kids to stand in this way or sit in this way or do this and what have you. But you can absolutely see that when you actually have a conversation with the teachers, like you said, they all want the best for the kids. They absolutely do. That's definitely what they want.
Totally. And I remember I was asked to work with a group of head teachers. I only had an afternoon, and it was just to facilitate one meeting to see if this group of head teachers wanted to work together. And it just reminds me what you're saying there, Debra. And one of the very simple things I did is I said to this group of head teachers, what had you go into teaching in the first place? Two of them ended up in tears because they just reconnected to what it was that had them go into teaching in the first place, which had nothing to do with exams and data. And it was to do with the love of sharing with young people. It was to do with sharing their passion of a subject. It was that desire to support and to help smaller human beings. We weren't, I was surprised because I really wasn't expecting that, but it was almost like they were so caught up in all the other stuff, the heady stuff, the intellectual stuff, that they kind of just lost touch with that heart stuff. And then when they'd kind of landed back in it just touched them, and it was really beautiful to see, actually.
Like you're saying, I think we all, once we're put back in touch with that, we just begin to thrive, don't we? It isn't rocket science. It's just kind of seeing, go with that and you will thrive. And what that looks like can be anything. I think very often we've quite by accident made up our ideas of what thriving is, and that is getting an A+ in every exam, or fitting in at school with the right people, or these we've made up that is thriving. And yet when there are so many different things that human beings can do in the world, and it's not all about getting a fantastic exam result. It's not all about that kind of thing, is it? There's so many different jobs that human beings can do. I mean, it's been really interesting with the four of us coming together, because like there's Julie and Lucy and Beck and me, and finding our feet over the last few months, who's good at what, who, and we've all, for a little while there, there was a little bit of two, and then we've just kind of settled into, oh yeah, Beck's way better at doing that and she likes doing it, why don't we let her do that? Oh, Julie's great at that, why don't we let Julie do that bit? Lucy's fantastic at that. And we've all got our strengths, we've all got our places, and we're not all the same. And it's like, why would we think that if you get a class full of kids, why would you think they're all going to be good at the same thing? Why would you think they're all going to want to do the same things? And it just makes no sense. And then
it makes no sense. It really doesn't. And I was going to say, when we allow young people just to get in touch with what makes their hearts sing, what they are drawn to, isn't that what we want in the world? Like, we genuinely don't need people. I mean, in the UK at the moment, exams have gone right back to a memory.
Oh. I think my internet has gone.
Hang on. Did you just disappear?
Yeah, I think I lost my internet connection for a minute there. Sorry about that.
So you're back. That's what, we've had a wild time when you were away. Oh my goodness, you missed it. You missed the best bit of the whole hour.
No.
But we were just saying, it's like, I think you're so right. It's like, this is, I mean, okay, I would love the whole at the moment, I think the education system just isn't fit for purpose. I would love it to change. And I would love what you're pointing to is just to really see our young people flourish and just become who they truly are in the world. And I just see that for me would be the most amazing thing. So I'm like a tiny little pebble in a massive ocean, and that's my bit. But I am a tiny pebble in the massive ocean, so I'm doing my best.
Look how many pebbles are on this call.
Yes.
It's definitely ricocheting out, and these conversations are the way forward, aren't they, to kind of get more people to see this for themselves and teachers on board. So it's been a delight and a pleasure to catch up with you tonight, Liz. Thank you so much. And just in case anyone is in the Barnstaple area on Monday afternoon, we are doing a free event to talk about what we've been talking about this evening, taking this into businesses and schools. Anyone who is slightly local and wants to come to that.
So just remind me when it is again. On the
Monday, the 15th. So
brilliant.
This coming Monday, 2:30 at Barnstaple Hotel.
Right.
So anyone's welcome, and that's a free event.
Right.
Are you back with us now, Deb? A minute until
She's back. She's on and on.
I'm having issues. The internet's taking a minute to get her back on the screen.
Oh, she's back. So just to remind people as well, the 22nd and 23rd of November for the conference. It's called Resilient Young Minds. This is open to across the world. We've got a live stream element. We really want to really broaden this conversation to say, how might we help young people get back in touch with who they truly are, and how can we support those that support young people to really be that in that space of understanding who they are, so they can support them. And we genuinely don't know the answer of the how, but we know if we get enough people together who are willing to find a way, that we will find the next step, and that's all we're after. So if you can join us, we'd love to see you. We're all coming along to that, so we're really excited about it. I know, I can't wait to. I've only ever seen you as pixelated things on my screen.
Yeah, that's going to be fab. So looking forward to that. And then next week, our lovely person for our Lovely People webinar is the lovely Jenny Anderson.
Oh, wow.
She'll be joining next Wednesday. So if you want to come along. And the recording from this will be on our YouTube channel fairly soon. Well, probably not tonight if the internet's playing up like it appears to be. But fairly soon, the recording will be on our YouTube channel. So I think that's probably all we were going to say at the end.
Deb, did you want to say anything else to finish up?
No, I think that's it. I just wanted to let Liz have a shameless plug for her conference. So we will, if I get it loaded up, if the internet allows me, I get it loaded up, I will put a link to be able to buy tickets for that, because I just think it's an amazing conversation to be in. I think this is brilliant, and I think it's great stuff what you're up to. So
and you too. Thank you so much. I've so enjoyed this evening. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for stepping in at the very last minute.
Yeah, it's really good. It's obviously meant to be. You're obviously meant to be.
Absolutely.
So thank you everyone for being here, and we will be back here again next week if if we don't see you before that. So take care. Have a lovely week, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.